On behalf of our team at RDIEC, we would like to welcome Major David Schneider and Aviator James Schneider. They're here this afternoon to discuss the type of work they do, the training they receive, the characteristics they're looking for in a candidate, the career opportunities, salary expectations, and the working conditions. Just a reminder before we begin that after you watch this presentation, please complete the survey found on our website, either by using the QR code or going to www.rdiec.ca. By completing the survey, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift card, which will be drawn at the end of every month. Thanks again to David and James for this informative presentation to help students in their quest to make a better choice about their future employment opportunities. Take it away, guys.
Thanks so much, Doug, for the introduction, and thanks for having us. My name is Aviator James Schneider, as said before, and here's my dad, Major Dave Schneider.
Afternoon, everybody.
We've been asked to put together a little presentation to showcase a few things about our careers and the things we've experienced throughout. Also, we're here because we share a Saskatchewan connection. We're both from Regina, Saskatchewan, and the opportunities that were available to us when we began our careers in the military are still the same careers that are available to any of you today, if you do so choose pursuing a career in the Canadian Armed Forces. So our aim for the presentation today is not to be a recruiting video. We're not trying to persuade an opinion one way or another, nor speak on the behalf of the Canadian Armed Forces. We're focusing on our personal experiences throughout our careers, who we are, our backgrounds, and the big picture and where our place is in it, and maybe a few things that you may not have thought of or something that you might find interesting.
So hello again, Major Dave Schneider, excuse me, Saskatchewan born and raised. I'm a Royal Canadian Air Force Aerospace Controller, and I'll discuss that later in the presentation, what that actually means. I'm currently working at the Warfare Center here in Trenton, Ontario. I have a 40-year career in the Canadian Armed Forces, starting with the Royal Canadian Naval Reserve and then in the Royal Canadian Air Force.
And I'm Aviator James Schneider. As said before, I am an aircraft structures technician. I'm currently posted at the Aerospace Telecommunications and Engineering Support Squadron in Trenton, Ontario. I'm working primarily as an aircraft refinisher, and I have just about under 4 years in the CAF at the moment. And I joined as a non-commissioned member, and I'll speak to that a little later in the presentation. And of course, I'm a son of a military family, and that has its pros and cons as well, which we can talk about later.
So my background, I'm born in Regina, as James mentioned right off the beginning. I grew up on a farm near Regina between Pence and Rollo. If you guys are familiar with the sitcom Corner Gas, Rollo, Saskatchewan, our farm was basically between those two centers there. Prior to joining the Air Force, I was in the Naval Reserve for 11 years. And while I was in the Naval Reserve, I also worked on the farm. I went to school for machining in Regina and Saskatoon. I worked at IPSCO, which is now called Everez in Regina there. And I also worked at the Co-op Refinery Upgrader.
My background, I was born in North Bay, Ontario, but that is not where I grew up. I grew up following my parents' postings. Being part of a military family, you'll be moved around from city to city potentially. And in my case, Moose Jaw, I was a young child, don't remember too much. I spent majority of my growing up years in Regina, Saskatchewan, and Winnipeg, Manitoba. In Regina, from I think it was grade 1 to grade 4, I was attending St. Angela Elementary School, if any of you have heard of it. And then in Winnipeg, from grade 5 to grade 11, and then Kingston, I spent my grade 12 year. And then after Kingston, I decided to return to Regina to pursue post-secondary at the U of R. Very unclear of my path in life, so I went undeclared, and after about a year, I still had no clue what I wanted to do, so I opted out. And so after, meanwhile, I'm being a server and a dishwasher. I was a guitar instructor, and then I started pursuing, after leaving school, I went into the heavy duty industry to work at Brandt Tractor as a loader and receiver. and potentially climb the ladder there. But then I noticed that there was not a lot of opportunity to climb the ladder without post-secondary in the heavy-duty industry. But that is also where I found interest in mechanics. So I looked at other ways to go about my career. I also have hobbies. You know, I like guitar, football, and video games, or games in general. Pretty average guy.
So yeah, why did I join the military? Why did I join the Naval Reserve Unit? Well, it turns out that one of my colleagues in grade 12 decided to recruit me and say, hey, do you want to come down and join the military? I had no idea what that meant. I had no mentor. I had nobody in my life that was military oriented. I didn't know anything about it. So I said, sure, okay, I'll go down just to check it out. So I went down there, and I liked the atmosphere. I liked what they were doing. I liked to see them on parade. I liked to see the potential of what the reserve had to offer. You know, going on the ocean, growing up in the prairies and being able to go out to BC and travel on the ocean seemed very exotic. So I thought I'd give that a try and get paid to do it at the same time. And there was no harm, no foul if I didn't like it.
Why did I join? Well, I grew up exposed to the military lifestyle. Being a child in a military family, you have no roots, depending on how many times you've been posted to different cities. In my instance, I grew up in multiple cities and went to multiple different high schools and schools in general. So I didn't have a particular group of friends that I was attached to, or a job I was attached to, or a spouse I was attached to. So joining the military was not much of a worry that I would be leaving something behind. And that is something notable to think about if you are considering a career in the armed forces. You may, or most likely will, be moving away from home. I had interest in working with aircraft. I think at the beginning of my military career, or before, I was thinking the only way to work with aircraft would be a pilot. But in fact, there are many ways to enter the aviation world besides just being a pilot, which I'll speak to a little later. But also working in the heavy-duty industry, that's where I kind of found my interest in maybe working a little bit with my hands or some sort of mechanics. The military trains and pays for your education. This is very true, because at a certain point when I was trying to find a career in aviation, I found a few colleges that would give you a 2-year diploma in aviation mechanics, or exactly like the trade like mine. But the military offers the exact equivalent, but they will also pay you as you're training. So as soon as you join the military, you're being paid and also receiving the equivalent education, which is great. I wanted a career instead of a job. I was working in a warehouse, and I was exposed to heavy-duty mechanics and jobs thereof, but there was no way to achieve those jobs unless going through some sort of post-secondary, whether that be college or university, where the military offers that as soon as you join, which is great. Why have one career when you can experience 11 of them? Big time, pertaining specifically to the trade I chose as an aircraft structures technician. Our trade has consumed so many trades, and it's just become a mega explosion of trades all in one. I'll talk about that in a second. And I'm introverted, and I still am. But the military atmosphere, it exposes you to things you otherwise would never have thought to take part in. And it really, you grow from it, and it builds so much character, and you really end up being a little bit proud of yourself, the things you partake in being part of the military. So to begin, I have a little bit of a roadmap that I went through when I started joining up in the military as an aircraft structures technician. This may look very similar. Anyone else is going through the same route, or it may look a little different. But for me, my application process initiated April 2017. I put in the application, the aptitude test, and the physical, the medical, and the interviews. And after I think it was about 6 or so months, I finally got a phone call to go to basic training. All while waiting for that phone call, you don't have to quit your job, which is great. So I maintained working at Brant Tractor, and then I got a phone call while I was on lunch break, and it was a pretty happy phone call. Very stressful though. Basic training is roughly around 3 months. It is lots of fun and also terrible at the same time. but you know, you come out of it really feeling like you've learned so much, and it's amazing the things that you get exposed to. After basic training, you were sent, or for me, I was sent to Borden, Ontario to begin my Common Core training. Common Core training includes basically fundamentals of just tool handling, how to turn a screwdriver, what exactly is a wrench. It's just a broad scope of just working with your hands. And once you graduate from that, you are then sent on a QL3 course, also at Borden, Ontario. And this course is roughly a little over a year long because our trade as an ACS technician encompasses so many trades all in one. It's just, they can only teach you the basics of so many things, and even then it still takes a year. So there's a lot going on during that training course. And then after about that, you end up getting posted to a unit, and hopefully a unit that you chose. You're allowed to choose, you know, your top 3 choices of where you'd like to move. And hopefully they have availability there and you will be sent there. And in my case, I requested Trenton and I was sent here. So I was posted to 8-Wing Trenton 8 Air Maintenance Squadron, August 19th. And roughly about a month later, there was more availability at ATES in Trenton. So I was shuffled over to the ATES Squadron instead. And that's something to think about as well. They will move you where they need you, and sometimes it may not be your decision. But I didn't have to move cities, so it's not the end of the world. ATES is a great place. And then once you're actually posted to your unit of choice, you begin your QL5 course apprenticeship program. This is basically repeating your QL3 course all over again, but without any supervision or a little less supervision. So it is another year-long or a year-and-a-half-long process, depending on your skill level. And then after you're graduating from that, then you do a journeyman rotation. And this is anywhere from a month to 6 months, depending again on your skill level. And this is completely done on your own and held to the standard that the trade requires you as a technician to withhold. And if you can see here, this is me receiving my very first rank as an aviator. It's a prop from the CO of ATES. And this little handshaking stick here is a little metal handshaking stick that ATES created, ACS technicians, welders, refinishers. This is so we can still be promoted and shake the hand of our CO while maintaining social distancing during COVID. So I thought that would be kind of something interesting to note. So the first bit of our trade, I guess, could be lumped into one word here, refinishing. This is a shop that I was posted to. It's a refinishing shop. This is a lot of what I know at the moment. So this includes designing and decals, similar to what you see on the F-18 here during an air show in 2017. We end up getting planes to decorate in a fancy way like this, and they go to the shop in ATES here. We do painting, sandblasting, chemical stripping, laser cutting, and sewing and upholstery. I'll talk about that as we go along. So some examples of things that come to ATES. This would be a 1957 Sabre. This is a podium plane, one of the planes you might find on a giant metal pole outside of a stadium or an arena. And so we received this sun damaged. So we had to strip it down to bare metal, reprime it, paint it, and restore it to its former glory. Another example of just training in general that as an ACS technician could go through. This is the ejection seat pulled off of the previous plane I just showed. Is full of bird poo and all sorts of bad things. And so we were tasked with restoring it and maybe making a fancy little ACS technician seat of some sort. And if we were able to do it, then you know what, you're good enough on the refinishing side of the trade, and they'll sign you off, which is pretty nice. So even so here's a picture of us doing a little bit of woodworking. This doesn't really include anything in our trade, but we do have availability to shops around us. And if you have previous woodworking skills or any other skills that don't really pertain to the trade, you're always welcome to bring those to the table. It always helps ACS technicians look pretty good. And so here's some upholstery being done. And then the embroidery machine to make the wording here. A little bit of metal bending being done on the armrest here, little metal work. And then also riveting this wheelie chair apparatus here to make it a functional wheelie chair to use in the office. And then at the end of the day, we had the RCAF commander, Lieutenant General Meinzinger. He made a visit to the shop and he noticed my chair and thought it was kind of neat. So took a seat in it and we took a picture of it. So I think that's pretty cool. Here's another example of just things that are done in shop. We have snowbirds. I think you guys are familiar with snowbirds from Moose Jaw. If they need any fancy designs being done, they're done in-house as well, or just other parts thereof. And here's an example down here of just the intricate design and decal work that we do for display planes. And again, the intricate designing and the feathers and whatnot isn't really a requirement, but if you have the skill, go for it. And so, there's a lot of arts, crafts, and stickers involved with our trade. So here's another example that I was brought in on. It was an old retired helicopter helmet that was completely destroyed, and so we brought it back again to its former glory in some sort of way, and then we were tasked with creating some sort of 8-wing CFB Trenton design, and this would be auctioned off at the 8-wing golf tournament charity event, which raised some money. So that was also a nice event to be taking part of. Another example of something I got to take part in the refinishing shop was sewing. There's a lot of sewing going on here. We were tasked with creating some sort of bed liner to line the Chinook here. They had issues with corrosion on the bottom bed here, so we had to create something to at least keep it neat and tidy. And these Chinooks would be deployed to Kuwait, Iraq, and so we just recently got our tarps sent back to us after being used and abused, and so now we're learning from this version what worked and what didn't, and we're going to make version 2 very soon. Another portion of our trade includes metal work. This is precision bending, machining, welding, heat treatment and riveting, operating laser cutters, and rigid fuel and fluid lines. Again, this is another jumble of trades included just with metalwork alone. So there's machining here, fluid lines and welding included in this little snippet here. Rivets would be these things you might find on the side of aircrafts if you've ever looked at an aircraft up close. And here's just an example of a mascot that a few ACS technicians at ADMS decided they were a little bit bored and wanted to showcase a little bit of the ACS skills that we have and create a guy out of just aircraft parts and machine parts. So when we have fun and when we're bored. So here's an example of me being used externally from the shop to perform ACS technician duties. I was sent to 429 Squadron on the flight line at Trenton, and these bays are like those big buildings you see on the side of runways that house big airplanes. And for this instance here, we have the C-17 Globemaster, and they had issues with corrosion on the back little tail here. I have an arrow, that's kind of where we were situated for a long time. So you'd come in and climb a giant ladder to get to the top. And so we have a technician here removing the shark skin from the external of the aircraft, and we had a lot of corrosion going on. And there's the lift we used to get up top. Here's a little bit of refinishing work after the scraping and all the cleaning up was done and all the fastener plates were removed. Here's some refinishing work alongside metal work that's being done. And here's a few ACS technicians on the inside working underneath, fastening the plates, and we were putting the part back on. Another part that encompasses our trade is composites. This includes repairing or manufacturing structures using carbon fiber, Kevlar, and fiberglass, and operating machines such as the 3D printer, lasers, water jets, and thermoformers. So a little snippet here, this would be an example of aircraft skin. This is a sandwich template here. Basically, the inside of an aircraft skin, at least, would be a type of honeycomb aluminum with the outer actual aluminum sheets creating the skin. And you would create basically a layup of carbon fiber or aluminum or fiberglass to patch over that using one of these machines, a heat con, basically laying together a bunch of sheets of carbon fiber or fiberglass, and this ensures a proper heat cycle and a proper cure of the material to create a proper patch over top of a hole. Just, you know, and that would be done if like the aircraft skin was dented or anything like that. And here's just a picture of a water jet. We have a few water jets and lasers that cut really, really thick steel. It's pretty cool. So a few more examples of just me being used as an ACS technician. We were sent to 436 Squadron, also within Trenton. These guys house the CC-130 Hercules, similar to like the gunships you see maybe in video games or movies, except we excluded the guns. We don't have any guns on ours. There was a bird strike and a little bit of a heat issue with one of the front windows and engines, and we were sent to replace the window. And you'd think that would take maybe, you know, one day, but this was a multiple day job over time and whatnot. You had to remove all the instruments, the pilot instruments and aeronautics from the inside pilot cockpit, and that took a full day in itself. And it's just an extensive job. And then a lot of our trade includes working with PRC, which is this tube you see here. This is like aircraft grade silicone, and we use it on a lot of things, and oh boy, it's sticky. Another part of our trade that I think the ACS technician video online that the Canadian Armed Forces provides neglects to mention is ALCI. If you look at our ACS video, they mention a lot about machining and welding and whatnot, but I think there might be maybe a sentence about ALCI, but this could potentially be, involve a lot of your career, depending where you're actually posted and what shop you're in. ALCI includes maintaining and packing and loading pilot helmets and compression suits, chaff and flares, which would be these guys here if you've seen in video games or movies, oxygen and fire suppression bottles, ejection seats, survival equipment, parachutes, life rafts, etc. And including with the survival equipment, there's a lot of maintaining, expiration dates, and there's just a lot of equipment packed into these bags that we send with pilots. So a little bit involved with ALCI, working with liquid oxygen, learning the dangers of it, and how combustible it is. It's pretty spooky stuff, but there's liquid oxygen involved with quite a few systems within an aircraft. And here's, just an example of training. We were all given ejection seats to practice just maintaining and different things you need to check over before a pilot is safe to take flight. And here's an example of us in training as well, working, I think this was a CF-18 canopy. They would dent the canopy here, and you would be tasked with buffing it out and making it as good as new. And that is also a very lengthy process done by hand. More example of ALCI would include packing chutes and the proper way to do it, inspecting all the lines and the canopy itself, ensuring that it's extremely safe. And when the pilot needs the chute to deploy, it's going to deploy and it's going to work the first time every time. So that's a very important part of that trade. And also inspecting the helmet integrity and the padding within, and just working one-on-one with pilots with the helmet and the suit here, fitting them to the pilots and making sure the compression systems within the suits here actually deploy properly, and the comm systems. It's quite a bit working one-on-one with the pilots as an ALCI technician. Another part that you could take part in being an ACS technician is being part of the recovery and salvage section. So I got lumped in with them, and I'm pretty glad I was. It's a really cool opportunity to be a part of a team that could be called on depending if there's an aircraft crash or even if there's an aircraft that overshoots the runway and gets stuck in mud, how do you recover? How do you salvage these aircrafts and be able to use them again? Or if not, then get them out of there and do the investigation later. An example of encompassing both ALSI and recovery and salvage section would be the Lethbridge Air Show crash in 2010. I had a few instructors involved. My instructor was an ALSI technician for this pilot, and so he told a few stories about being involved, and they are extensively involved with this. The pilot made it out alive due to, of course, the ALSI technician packing the chute properly, the flight suit worked properly, and of course the ejection seat worked properly, good for them. And so no fatalities in this crash, and here are the RAS technicians later, after the fact, cleaning up wreckage and salvaging anything they can. And just a quick note that I think is neat, I think the Armed Forces do a very good job of advertising the desert, sandy places you could be deployed to. But after joining, I found out about CFS Alert, a Signals Intelligence Intercept Facility. This is located way up here in the North Pole, and you can be deployed for roughly about this amount of time. And I have one friend deployed there right now, and it sounds like such a great time. And hopefully I can do it one day too, but safe deployment, I think it would be a really neat opportunity for anybody.
Well, James, there's a lot to that trade for sure.
Thanks.
So back to me for a minute. So my beginning of my career, I mentioned, was in the Naval Reserve, non-commissioned member, just like James was, and I'll explain that a little bit later as well. The military trained me as well to be a marine engineer and a diesel mechanic, and what both those trades do, they have to do with the propulsion systems of the ships, as well as the firefighting equipment and most mechanical stuff that's on board. So we become experts in that. If anything breaks or to operate it, they came and say us to make sure the ship was seaworthy and ready to go. I also, later on in my career at the Reserve, became a parade ground instructor, which in the Army would be called a Sergeant Major. You might be familiar with that from movies. The guys sitting out in the parade square and yelling and screaming at all the troops to lift their legs and left, right, left, that type of thing. I did that as well. And also a great thing for me as well is I met my wife in the Navy. So yes, ladies, if you're out there and you're thinking about the military at all, it is absolutely open to the females as well. So while I was in the Reserve, which was a part-time job, my real job, in quotes, was machinist. So that encompassed at least 8,000 hours on the job work experience under a Journeyman Machinist, as well as each year for 4 years I had to go away for academic training. So I did that for my real job, being the Reserve, being my job I did in the evenings and weekends, or whenever I had time off from my machining career. This slide just shows the different pieces of equipment I worked on. Those parts, I made similar stuff to that. I didn't make those parts exactly, but that's the type of thing I worked on, is precision metalworking. So after about 11 years in the Reserve, I had to kind of come to meeting and try to figure out what I really want to do with my life, if I want to continue on with my machining career, stay in the Reserve, quit the Reserve, whatever. And I came to the decision that I enjoyed the military more than the machine aspect, and I wanted to do it full time. So what I did was I joined the Air Force. And also at that moment, I knew that I had the skills and abilities to be an officer, so I wanted to be a leader. I figured I could contribute in that manner. So I went to basic training in Chilliwack and ended up in St. Jean de Richelieu, same as James did, the bottom picture there. Just want to point out a couple pictures that are rappelling 200 feet. What the military does for your basic training is they don't help you conquer your fears, but they help you deal with them. One of my fears is heights, and this 200-foot cliff was a nightmare for me, but I managed to get over it, and it was a great feeling to get to the ground. Also on the picture there with me carrying the rifle, I think James and I would both like to point out that if, some people think the military, the first thing to think of is guns and killing things and that type of thing. That's not what we do at all. We don't carry a rifle to work. It's not to say that other people don't in the Army and that type of thing. That's what they do for a living, but not us. So there are many, many aspects of the military where you're not carrying a weapon and you're doing other things for your real jobs. So after basic training, then I went on to be an air weapons controller, and after a number of years, then I became an air traffic controller, and I'm going to explain the difference between those two in the next slide. So an air weapons controller is basically helping the pilots look at the big picture. So I was a controller, so I talked to airplanes, but my job was to direct the fighter aircraft to go and intercept with an unknown aircraft or a hostile aircraft. So there's a number of ways you can do that. One was in the center picture here, shows the Canadian Defence Air Ops sector in North Bay. I worked in there. They have radars that go all around North America that they can tie into and control airplanes right across North America. Another option is this AVAX plane here with this radar dome here. That's flying saucer. That's radar. There's people in there that are controlling airplanes. Also off a ship, I did that on HMCS Iroquois. Shipborne control, so there's radar systems on there talking to these fighter aircraft and telling them where the bandits, which is a code word for hostile aircraft or the unknown aircraft, really need to go, and given the big picture, you know, telling them that there's a bandit over here or there's a friendly over here, that type of thing, giving pilots the bigger picture in the sky. So after a number of years of doing that, I switched over to being an air traffic controller, which is something you're probably more familiar with. If you go to any airport in the world, you'll find these two types of jobs there. You'll find an ATC tower controller, which is a guy or gal that sits up in the tower here with the glass windows, and they're controlling airplanes using their eyeballs. And there's also, you may or may not see these people down here that control aircraft using radar, which is very similar to what I did with the air weapons controller. The main difference with the two is air traffic controller keeps the good guys apart, keeping everybody safe. The air weapons controller is bringing everybody together safely, but bringing them together. So that's the big picture difference between those two. So being the air battle manager or air weapons controller, the first place I went to was North Bay, Ontario. And if you look at this picture right here, I worked in that complex there. It was 600 feet under solid granite. Those doors are 19 tons each. And the whole purpose of that bunker was to withstand a nuclear blast. So it was built in the late 50s, early 60s. It was under continuous use until very recently, probably within the last 10 years or so. I enjoyed that job. Is definitely something that not many people got to do or see. That's where I started. And this right here, those are the radar scopes that I used. They're now in a museum, by the way. I'm old. This is the same complex, but above ground, but they do the same job we did for all these years. If you guys are familiar with NORAD Track Santa, if you're familiar with Santa Claus at Christmas time, the people that track Santa Claus and know where he is and tell everybody on the website, these are the people that do that. So they're the NORAD Track Santa people. There's Iroquois again, controlling from there. I did that as well. In the bottom left corner is the big picture why NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, which is encompassing all these jobs, is to protect the airspace of North America. And this picture right here shows a Russian Bear bomber that was intercepted by the Canadian CF-18 in Inuvik, and I was involved with helping control that intercept as well. So from North Bay, we moved on to Moose Jaw. So this is when I switched over to my air traffic control job. You can see my office being a little window right there. That's me in my office right there. Obviously, the snowbirds you're probably familiar with, as James said, controlling many, many aircraft. Moose Jaw is the busiest military airport in Canada, and one of the top, I think it's still the top 10 busiest airports in Canada. So there's lots of airplanes to control. It had its moments of sheer terror, but it was a very enjoyable job, and I liked it a lot. From Moose Jaw, we moved on to Winnipeg. So it was time to go from talking to airplane type of job to being a staff officer, a desk officer type of job. So I was posted to the 1 Canadian Division, Canadian Northern Region headquarters, this building here in Winnipeg. And so what their job there is to be the overall command and control for the whole Air Force, not just intercepting unknown aircraft or hostile aircraft, but all airplanes. So the ones James are working on, the Hercules, all that type of stuff, tell them to go here, there, pick up this piece of kit, move it over there, all that type of stuff. It's all controlled from Winnipeg. I was part of the team, the Combined Air Ops Center in the bottom pictures there. I was the standards and training officer for that, to help design that room and get it working, and it's been in use for some time now. My last year in Winnipeg, I worked at Barker College up here. You see a number of people sitting around a table here. What they're doing is developing the curriculum for the Air Force Officer Development Program. And I was part of that team as well, which helped junior officers develop professionally in their careers. From Winnipeg, we moved on to Kingston, where I became a divisional commander for 250 cadets. That's me right here, this little guy here in the blue. That's all my cadets there, 250 of them. It was quite a challenging job. They're all young people like yourselves, wanting to be military officers. They were there taking 4 years of university classes, as well as military leadership at the same time. Once they graduate, they're a full military officer with lots of experience and free tuition, and they get paid to do it as well. This picture up here is showing they have basically what we might consider their basic training to get into the college. I would consider it more of a fun thing. It's challenging, but it's a team building event. They have a number of different obstacles. A big obstacle course that they have to go through, and it binds the squadrons all together to work with as a team. So it was quite interesting work there. Then from Kingston, I was lucky enough to be chosen to go over to Europe, and we went to Mons, Belgium, and working in the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe. It's called SHAPE, down here, this big complex right here. There's about 1,000 people working in there. And again, it's a headquarters building, so a lot of staff work, desk work, paperwork, that type of thing, helping NATO with their military strategic hat on to lead the alliance in the direction that they needed to go. NATO, if you're not familiar, is the biggest part about NATO, that why nations want to be part of NATO is because of the Article 5 treaty, which indicates that if any one of those nations, the 29 nations in NATO, gets attacked, that means it's attack against everybody. So if we get attacked, all the 28 nations that are associated with NATO would help us. So that's why, some militaries aren't as big as others, and they need help, and that's what NATO is all about. It was a great place to work, experienced numerous cultures, traveled extensively, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 different countries. It was a great, great experience, and to be able to incorporate different people's way of thinking and comparing it to ours and the pros and cons of both. It was a very interesting place to work. Coming back from Europe a couple of years ago, we moved to Trenton, which is where we are now. So I'm working at the Aerospace Warfare Center, home of the National Air Force Museum of Canada. Those pictures in the top left there. This is my building I'm working right here. And I say it's full of old people. What I mean by that is people that work there have extensive experience in the military and the Air Force specifically, and they've kind of been there and done that. So what our job is to figure out what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and what we need to do in the future, and help guide the Air Force towards that. My piece of that puzzle is in concept development and experimentation. So I'm helping the Air Force get new certain types of equipment, different ways of doing things, and help them lead them into the future. The next thing we'd like to explain to you guys, enough about us, back to the big picture of the Canadian Armed Forces and how James and I fit into it. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but basically you can see that there's about 100,000 people in the Canadian military. They're broken down into Army, Navy, and Air Force, obviously. And there's about 18,000 people in the Air Force. 15,000 of those are full-time people, and 3,000 are reservists. So out of those 18,000 people, there's 18 different ranks. So each one of us, out of those 18,000 people, carries one of these ranks. And of course, you start at the bottom and work up. But this group of 18 ranks are divided into two big groups. There's the officers at the top part of the line there, and those basically, you might say, the policy makers. Non-commissioned members, who are basically the policy and make it happen. So they're the doers. They're the ones, if you don't have them, you can make all the policies you want and nothing's going to happen. Just for your awareness, these are the different names of different ranks. Aviator, you might have heard a few of them from movies or whatnot: corporal, sergeant, maybe warrant officer, but those are all of them there. Those are the officer ranks, what they're called. And you probably heard of maybe a couple of those general you're probably familiar with, or major or captain, but those are all the different ranks. But the main meat and potatoes you probably want to know is how much money do I make? So if you join as a non-commissioned member, these numbers here, these are annual salaries, so how much you make per year. So you can see that an aviator, somebody just starting out in the Air Force, that's pretty darn good wage, right? And it goes up from there. It depends on your skills and your particular trade. Those numbers could actually be higher than that. So those are the annual salaries for the NCMs. And the officers are here. It's kind of interesting to note the officer cadet makes less than a private, but then the gains are more at the top end. But the most important thing to learn in this is that if you go up to a full general, 4-leaf general here, there's only one of those guys in the whole Canadian Armed Forces. So out of 100,000 people, there's only one of them. So not everybody is going to be able to rise to that rank and make $300,000 a year. Lieutenant General Meisinger, that James talked about here, he's a 3-leaf general, so this is his wage. So that's a pretty good wage, but there's only a couple of people on that rank level. And obviously as you go down, there's more and more and more people, right? So again, out of 18,000 people, very few people rise to these highest ranks, the generals and the warrant officer, master warrant officer, chief warrant officer. Yes, everybody has the potential to get there at the beginning. It depends on your skill level, whether you want to do it or not. It's a choice in the end because it becomes a work-life balance at some point. So there's kind of a sweet spot in here, the circle here. Most of the people in the Canadian Forces, or at least in the Air Force, are in this rank level. So from Master Corporal to Warrant Officer, and from Captain to Colonel. That's kind of the most people are in those ranges right there. Not to say everybody, obviously people go past that, but that's the majority of the people. Just to give you an idea.
So things you may not have thought of in general, like my dad mentioned earlier, not everyone will rise to the top ranks or wants to. This implies again to work-life balance and goals. Some personal note to that, I work with quite a few people who are at the rank of corporal, which is the rank I will be hopefully soon. You make a very livable wage at that rank, and the military supports any member who doesn't feel like they want to climb the rank structure or ladder, and that's completely okay. So if you want to, great. If not, that's fine. There's a balance, whether you're willing to sacrifice free time or family time. You can, of course, climb the ladder, but that comes with more time at work and more overtime, and there's risks with that as well. And if you don't want to climb the ladder, that's the Canadian military supports that. You're entitled to gym time during work hours, and you have a free base gym membership. This is something I take advantage of as much as possible. You're entitled to at least 3 times a week to go to the gym during work hours and make money while working out. Can't get better than that. And you have a free base gym membership. Every base in Canada has a building or a gym that you have a free membership to. And your spouse or your family members, if not a free membership, they have a very cheap membership to join you as well. So that's a really nice incentive. There's team building and community involvement. That's just all about the military atmosphere, really. You're getting involved with communities that you're surrounded by, the city, or even just like this little picture right here. Not a very great one, but this is us just during a sports day where everyone just puts down the tools and plays some hockey on the flight line in between hangars. It just builds a lot of morale and team building. Again, also getting involved with the community, like for me being sent to old folks homes to talk to old retired vets, or taking part in parades that you present with the community as well. Things that, again, I wouldn't have thought I would be involved in, but being involved in them, it really does build some character. And also, every base has 3 messes, and these messes are basically like a restaurant or a bar facility. It's a place where all your members or team members or colleagues can get together and just have some fun unwind and again, do some team building. And they're separated by ranks. So there would be the junior ranks mess, which I would belong to, which allows the aviators to master corporals to, mingle. And then they have the senior ranks mess, which would be sergeants till chief that they mingle. And then there's the officers rank, which all the officers together mingle in that mess. So that's an available thing in every base. And then military pays for your moves between locations. I can speak to that, as I think about close to 2 years ago, after I finished training in Borden, I was posted to Trenton, Ontario, and that means moving me. And that involves moving my house, or me selling my house, but they also pay for a lot of these fees involved with moving from a city to another city. A lot of the stuff, or if not all of the stuff, is paid for as best to their ability. And so it's very low cost to you. So if you're ever planning on maybe moving away from home, maybe joining the military would be a cheaper option for you, potentially. Also, additional training and qualifications. This is something that you can think about, like as an NCM member, someone who's joined without any post-secondary education. You join and then you're just training and you're being educated, throughout your entire career, and it never ends. There's always refreshers of first aid and firefighting, weapons training, if that involves you, gas training, and even leadership training, training you to be a better leader and a better supervisor, and potentially maybe even commissioning over from an NCM to an officer, which is an option as well. So as an NCM, you don't need any post-secondary education. However, many NCMs are highly educated. So you can join as an NCM like I did myself without really any post-secondary education, and you're good to go. But there's also, you can have post-secondary education under your belt, and you can join as an NCM. It more just depends on what you're looking for in a career. Some NCM trades don't offer the same things as officer trades, and vice versa. So it really all depends on kind of what you want to do with your career. Also, I didn't have a post-secondary education joining, but after I joined, I received roughly about 3 years of post-secondary education and training, equivalent to civilian colleges up until now. I've been training all the way up until now, and then the military trains you and pays you while you're training. So I've been working up until now and being paid for it. So all this training, I think I just finished training, a few months ago. And now I'm able to, I'm a big boy and I can work on airplanes without supervision. And this has all been paid for. It's just been a job at this point. And ability to cross over to officer later in career. I have one guy I know in the metal shop. He's a sergeant there, and he's in the middle of commissioning over to the officer side from being an NCM. And these are options that absolutely available to you if you show enough motivation and if your profile looks pretty good enough. Also, free education while you work. This is something that's available to anyone as well as an NCM. If you show you want to, pursue some post-secondary while working, that's completely optional to you. You can go take university courses on weekends or after work to get better education, just for personal use, or if you're planning to commission over as an officer later in life.
Thanks, James. Yeah, so an officer, something you may not have thought of, all officers are required to take second language training. So if you're English, you learn French. If you're French, you learn English. If you're bilingual, get on you, because it's something that you need to do throughout your career. It's a great thing if you want it. Absolutely, it's a good thing. Of course, they train you to do that. You don't do that on your own. Free education, same thing that James is saying. So yeah, their deal is that if you want to take a university class, the deal is you pay for it. You pass the class, they will reimburse you. So it's free education. Another way free education is Royal Military College of Canada, where I worked. As I mentioned, you could join as an officer cadet, get paid to take university classes, and be a military officer. There's also civilian university they would also pay for if you're the trade you're taking and the degree you're going for doesn't jive with what military college offers. they will send you to a civilian university and you get paid to do that as well. And in your off time, like during your summer, you would take the military training. Career along professional development, as James says, it just never ends. There's and make it sound like it's a bad thing. It's not. There's always leadership training. There's all kinds of things that we take throughout our careers. It's amazing when you build your resume at the end of your career, all the different stuff you don't even think of, all the different classes and training you've had is, you don't even realize you're doing it when you start your career. The reserve, if you may not have thought of that, it's flexible work. It's part-time, full-time. So you could go 1 day a month if that's all you have time for, or up to full-time, like 30 days a month. You're able to pursue other careers as I did, my journeyman career, while I was still in the reserve. You never have to move if you don't want to. So if you guys in Regina, if you're there and you want to join like a place like the Armories or HMCS Clean there, you can have a full career there and never move. There's many reserve units throughout Canada, and if you do happen to move for whatever reason, you can easily move or transfer you from one unit to the other and just carry on from where you left off. You can quit any time, so there's no requirement to stay in a certain length of time. Great pay. It's 92% of the regular force pay. So you saw those numbers up there. Those are regular force numbers, but 92% of those numbers, that's what you would be making as well. And if you want to, transfer to the regular force at any time. So you can dip your toe into the military pool, so to speak. And if you feel you like it, you can just transfer over to the regular force anytime you like, or not. It's up to you. And lastly, you're talking about some benefits, which is hard to think about when you're a younger person, but believe me, as soon as you get in for a little while, you start thinking about these things. The pension is basically 2% per year. 25 years is the minimum amount of time you need to put in to get 50% of your income for the rest of your life. If you decide to leave before the 25 years, and this is a regular force position I'm talking about here, you will get all your money back and then some, but it just won't be a monthly pension. Medical, obviously paid for 100% for a military member and subsidized for your spouse and family. This is something, the next bullet, that I didn't have an opportunity to take advantage of because it didn't exist when James was a baby. But paternity benefits and maternity benefits. So we can get 92% of your pay if you have a baby and you want to stay home and raise your child for almost a year, I think it is. You get 92% of your pay. So that's great. They don't penalize you for having a baby or anything like that. Dental, again, 100% paid for military members, subsidized for spouse and family. And last but not least, what everybody likes is the pay, right? So who likes to go talk to their boss and say, hey boss, I think I deserve a pay raise? Well, you don't have to do that in the military. You get annual pay incentives, whether you like it or not. So each year, each rank has a certain number of incentives that you get. So on your anniversary date, you automatically get a pay raise. And tied to that is a pay increase. So it's different than an incentive. Whereas we're tied to the public service now, the military. So every time the public service gets a pay raise, the military does as well. You think that to that, James?
Yeah, just to reiterate what my dad was saying about annual pay incentives. This completely cuts out, again, that awkward conversation you may have to have with your boss saying, please, 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 I've been here for a year. Can I have a couple extra cents an hour? And maybe that's the best you can negotiate. Where this, they're big jumps. Just to talk about, like, my first year, I was making, $35,000 a year. And then the next year, without having to negotiate, I'm making $45,000. And then the next year, I'm making $55,000. And now in my next promotion here in November, I'll be making roughly around $72,000 to $73,000 a year. And then it drops down after that. But there's still incentives even then yearly after that. And those are huge jumps. So it's something to really think about, that you won't have to hassle your boss anymore about anything like that.
That's a good point. And also, I think James, because he's a specialized trade, he also gets more money as well, right? That's
true. So I'm a specialist 1 trade. There's specialist 1 trade and specialist 2 trades. These are just trades that just involve a little more extensive knowledge or training or skill levels, I suppose. So they end up paying you a little bit more. So the average corporal makes around $66,000, $67,000. Where I'll be making a little bit more just due to the specialization I'm in right now.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. And folks, that's all we had for you. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
That's excellent. This is Kevin. Kevin here with the RDIEC, and as a former career counselor, I had so many students that I shouldn't say so many students, but over the years, a number of students that entered the armed forces or Navy or Air Force, and not one of them came back with negative reviews. And it seemed like in every case, they all made a a full-time career out of it, and some of them are actually retired now. But it's just all the things you said. It is such a positive way to get trained and to have a really rewarding career. So thank you very much. I think you did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
James, I'm curious about your trade. So the painting and of the planes and stuff, are you involved with that?
Yeah, absolutely. They, depending on the airworthiness of the aircraft, some of these are just for show. Like I said before, the planes you would find sitting outside of whatever, an education facility or a stadium or whatnot, those aren't as important. So if there's some mistakes, it's okay. They'll add new guys on, and you can definitely take part in painting those. I'm going to be involved with painting. We're getting a few of the show planes again for the next upcoming air show, and so I'll be taking part in that as well. So it's coming. I just came out of a training, so I'm just starting to dabble into actually doing some work instead of just painting random things. But on top of planes, it's also just projects. Units will send you apparatuses like ladders or poles or some sort of panel for some sort of electrical box or what have you, and you'll have to again refinish these and paint them and make them look nice again. So it involves more than just aircrafts as well.
Very cool. I'm an ex-auto body teacher, so I would love your trade.
Right on. Cool.
Awesome, man. Very cool. The amount of learning that you guys have done over the course of your careers, and I have to compliment you. Out of all the videos that we have for the Armed Forces, you delve into a lot of questions that kids are going to have, and you put a lot of effort into it. And just from our organization to you guys, thank you very much. This was very informative and very different perspective from within, so it was good. I'll open up to the rest of the folks for questions.
For a student that's interested in pursuing a career in the armed forces, what would you recommend for them to do in high school? Would you recommend them to get involved somehow? What are things that they can do right now?
Well, obviously the starting point to join the military is the recruiting center. But that said, there's also, and I keep mentioning a number of times because that's my background, is the reserve units. So if they're even at all interested, just want to see stuff in real life, like, walk into a building and see what they do, or talk to someone and say, hey, what are you doing? Or maybe they'll invite you to come down and see a parade that they do, or something like that. I mean, that was in the past, they allowed to do that. You have to check into that as a student, but I can't see why they wouldn't. And that would be a good way just to see what they're doing and maybe see if you like it or not.
Perfect.
As a requirement.
As a requirement?
As a requirement, I don't think
there's no requirement.
Like, to speak personally, I volunteering is great. I didn't do a whole lot before joining, and it is not a requirement to join the armed forces at all. On the officer side, I know it is very it's competitive when you do have volunteering under your profile. They look at that as well, but on my side, I had no volunteering. It is based on your high school education, whether you completed whatever the requirement may be, that being grade 10 or your full GED, and I mean, that's about it. And whether you have any knowledge into the trade that you're joining.
That's a good point, James. And I guess I didn't quite fully understand the question, I guess, but yeah, absolutely. If you're thinking about going the opposite direction, if you're in high school, of course, think about university, because one way or the other, you're going to have to take a degree. Now, whether you go and get it paid for at RMC or a civilian university through the military, or do it on your own, you're going to have to take that course of action. They do have now they say that there's this one program that's very specific where they would allow you to join and then get a degree afterwards, but it's only under specific circumstances for specific people, and the reserve, not reserve unit, but the recruiting center would be able to guide people with that. So if you are thinking of an officer, absolutely you have to think about university and want to go that direction. For an NCM, it's not quite the same. All right.
Awesome, thank you. I know a lot of our communities have cadets and those type of programs that students can join in high school, and that's not to determine whether or not they can make a career out of this or not, but I think things like that also help too in that decision-making process. So thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. The cadets only go up to age, I think it's, I don't know what the age group, but it's usually younger people, but that is an option as well, for sure.
Yeah.
Great job, gentlemen. How many years do you need to serve if you decide to leave the military?
That's a really good question, Doug. You can sign up for different increments, right? So James, you signed up for 4?
Yeah, depending again on the amount of training they need to put into you. Since I had to do a little bit more training than the average trade in the NCM world, we signed under a 5-year contract, initial contract. Others are usually about 3 years, but mine's 5, and then after 5, you'll be signing another 20-year contract to complete, to get your full 50% pension.
And for the officers, it's similar but different. It depends on the trade you're taking. Right now, if you want to be a pilot, I think because pilot is such a demand, such a high cost to train a pilot, they want to keep them in longer after the trained, right? So I think it's 7 years, if I remember correctly. If you want to be a pilot, once you're trained, 7 years from that point, you have to stay in. After that, you can leave, go to Air Canada, do whatever you want. There's also a restriction for my trade, aerospace controllers, same reason, high cost in training, people leave and go work for NAV Canada and go work at their local airports. I think it's 6 years or 5 years. I don't remember the exact numbers. The recruiting center would have that. But in general scale for the officers, there's points where you usually join for initial engagement up to 9 years, excluding of what I just talked about, what the pilots and controllers. After 9 years, you join from 9 years to the 25-year mark, and then there's what's called indefinite period of service, where you can go as long as you want to, up to age, well, even past age 60 now.
65 now.
Is it 65? It used to be 55 when I joined, but now they keep raising it because we need people, we need experience, and so they keep raising the retirement limit.
I always like to know what the next move is for, for people in their careers. And I'm not thinking you guys are a package deal because you're both ending up in Trenton right now, but where do you see yourself? Do you know ahead of time when that next move is going to come? How much notice do they give you? Or is it initiated by you?
That's a really good question. It's kind of both. Usually you can tell, and my wife is really good at this, she gets a feeling. She says, you know what, it's going to be happening, it's going to be happening. And so it's a constant part of your career is change and moving, which is one of the things that kind of scares us a little bit about retirement, is we're never going to be able to move again. But that said, how do you know? Well, usually a posting is around 4 years, depending. If you're like a commanding officer or something like that, usually it's 2 to 3 years. And so you kind of know, and you're in constant contact with your what's called a career manager. So this person, his whole job is to tell people when they need to move and where they need to move to. And so you can have discussions with them and say, okay, I want to move at this time, is that possible? Or the other way around, we need you to move at this time. So it's kind of back and forth. Sometimes it's very short notice. Sometimes it's, like a year out, you're going to be moving next year. Like when I was in Europe, one of those situations like that, when you're working outside of Canada, it's very strict dates. You're going to be leaving on this date, you're coming back on this date. So you know 3 to 4 years in advance when you're coming back, because those are very specific positions, and they need to make sure they're always filled. So you know exactly when you leave, when you're coming back. If you're domestic within Canada, it's a little different, it's a little more flexible, depending on the priority of the position you're going into.
I know you touched on lots of possibilities for travel, and I know that you and your wife traveled a ton when you were in Europe. Maybe you just want to touch on that a little bit, because I know young people always want to talk about travel, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you see some pictures there. That's just a small snippet of all the places we've met and places I've been. Tammy as well, my wife. That said, most of that was done on. I think maybe it's 50-50. I'd have to think about it. A lot of the places I went to on that stream there, I was paid to go. So I had a job to do in those locations. So I would go there and do part of my work. And of course, then you usually have some time off of some sort, but it might be a small amount of time. It might be a large amount of time, depending on how long you're there and what you're actually doing there. So some of those things that I went to were actually paid for. So there's travel involved, but there's lots of times where you don't have to travel. So if you don't want to, they might tell you have to, but other times you kind of seek them out, in which I did in Europe. It was such a unique position over there that I could, you know what, I think I need to go here, and this is why, and you make a case for it, and then they sometimes let you go. But of course, if you do get over to a place like Europe, once you're there, it's fairly reasonable price to move around and to go to see different things. So the opportunity was there, and my wife and I just went for it. So there's the two. Sometimes it's actually a paid vacation, you're working, but of course it's always neat to go to a neat place and do some work, right? See different people, see different things. Other times it's on your own dime.
This is an old guy question for you, David, but with your pension, you can retire after 25 years, 2% a year. If you work longer than that, you keep accumulating that 2% each year?
That's a really good question, and yeah, James asked me that earlier today. So the maximum amount number of years, pensionable years, is 35. So after 35 years, you get 70% of your wage for the rest of your life. That's the maximum amount your pension can be. My specific case, because I've been in the forces for 40 years, the first 11 being reserve, they weren't counted for full time. So I was able to buy back 4 years of my pension full time with the reserve. So right now, with my full-time regular Air Force job, plus the reserve time, I have over 33 years pensionable service, even though I've been in the forces for 40, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Any other questions, people?
Just a comment, not a question so much as I'd really like to thank you guys for your service. I just think we don't we don't do that enough, and thank you very much.
Well,
Appreciate it
very much.
Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you very much, guys. And appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll be chatting again. Thanks.